Episode 1. She wept once, and nothing ever grew again. No one talks about Saint Ilena anymore. Not in this town. Not out loud. Her statue still stands in the center of Greywick, head bowed, eyes carved so delicately they almost look elevy, but people cross the street to avoid it. Some swear they hear it crying when the sky is clear. Others just whisper one thing: don't look her in the eyes, especially if it's raining. I looked anyway, because I never believed in saints or curses or whispered warnings handed down like heirlooms. Not until I moved here. I came to Greywick after the fire. My old life had burned, literally and otherwise. I needed quiet, a place to forget. What I found was a town that had forgotten itself. Shops boarded up, crops that never bloomed, rivers that refused to flow straight through, people who smiled without meaning it and jumped at the sound of church bells. It didn't feel haunted. It felt held hostage by her. The first time I saw the statue, it was dusk. A single drop of water traced down her marble cheek. Though the sky was dry and the air was still, I touched the base of the pedestal and found something carved beneath the dirt. She begged God to take her pain. He answered by taking ours. That night, I dreamed of her. She was kneeling in the chapel, robes soaked in blood, eyes wide, but not afraid, disappointed. She looked at me and whispered something in a language I didn't know. But I woke up crying, and the next morning, my landlord was dead. They said it was his heart, but his mouth was wide open, fingers locked in prayer, eyes melted in their sockets, and carved into the wall above his bed. One tear for mercy, one for wrath. I didn't tell anyone about the statue, or the dream, or the prayer I whispered the night before, drunk and alone. God, take him if you have to. Just don't take me. Now I can't stop thinking, did she hear me? And, worse, was her tear for me? Episode 2. The town that buried her alive. They call her a saint, but saints don't beg, and she begged. I found the records buried beneath the chapel floorboards, bound in lambskin, cages warped by moisture and time. No title, no date, just one sentence scratched across the first page in faded ink. Saints are made by blood, but some are made by fear. It wasn't a hagiography, it was a confession, written by the mayor of Greywick in 1832. Ilena wasn't always a statue. She was once flesh and voice and fragile breath, too holy for her time, or maybe just honest. She came from nowhere, no family, no history. She arrived barefoot during a drought, stood in the center of the square, and said 3 words that changed everything. God still listens. And the rain came, not a drizzle, a flood. Cattle stood again, fields bloomed, the sick healed. They worshipped her, praised her, built a chapel from their own hands. But Ilena wept, always, every night, sometimes in joy, sometimes in silence, but always. The tears came, and one day, the tears turned black. The town changed overnight. Children vanished, rivers receded, crops rotted from within. No one blamed her, at first, until a girl named Cora was found outside the chapel, mouth sewn shut, hands clasped in prayer, eyes gone. They dragged Ilena from the altar, screaming, pleading, "This isn't me. I only ask. I don't command." But the people of Greywick no longer heard prayers, only consequences. So they buried her, alive, behind the chapel. No coffin, just stone and earth. And when they were done, they planted a statue above her, carved in her likeness, head bowed, eyes hollowed. And from that day forward, the rain only came when she cried. The final page of the journal was different, fresher, written in a hand that trembled. We buried her and thought the curse would pass, but God heard the tears, and now He turns His face from us. She weeps still, and so do we. Last night, I passed the statue again, and I saw something impossible. The marble eyes blinked. Episode 3. The miracle that killed the priest. The priest's name was Father Harrow, the only man in Greywick who still rang the chapel bell, and the last man foolish enough to preach in her name. He said Ilena was misunderstood, that miracles had always come at a price, that saints weren't softly bled. He called her blessed. The town called him next. I was there the morning he died. The church pews were nearly empty, just a few old women muttering rosaries with trembling fingers. I Saturday in the back, unsure why I even came. Maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, maybe something darker. Father Harrow stepped to the pulpit, hands firm despite the chill in the room. He wore red, the color of martyrs. She weeps not in wrath. He said, voice calm, but in remembrance. You cursed the hand that once healed you. Murmurs stirred, some stood to leave, others crossed themselves, not out of faith but fear. Then he did something no priest had done in 50 years. He blessed the statue. He walked outside, lifted his hand, and placed the fingers on the statue's marble foot. Forgive us, Ilena, for we knew not what we buried. The wind stopped, the bells rang on their own, and the sky cracked open not with lightning, but with light, blinding, golden, terrifying. Every window shattered, every candle flared, the ground trembled, and then he began to rise. Yes, rise. Father Harrow floated to feet above the earth, arms outstretched like crucifixion. His face was calm, lips moving in silent prayer, and for a moment, just one breath-long moment glowed. People screamed, fled, hid, but I couldn't move, because I saw her, not the statue, standing behind him, eyes red, gown of thorns, bare feet stained in something darker than dirt, and her mouth moved. This is not forgiveness, this is memory. Then Father Harrow screamed. The glow turned to fire, his skin blackened, his robes glowed like ash, and then he collapsed, but not broken, eyes open, hands still reaching toward heaven. Dead, they buried him that night without a mass. No cross, no hymn, only silence. And the next morning, the statue was different. She was smiling. Episode 4. Why the rain turned to salt. They thought it was fog at first, a fine mist rolling down from the hills, thick and still, like breath held too long. But when it touched the windows, it left crust. When it touched the skin, it stung like truth. The rain had come back to Greywick, but now it tasted like salt. Children cried when it touched their tongues. Dogs howled. Duffields hissed, rejecting every drop. But the worst was in the chapel. I saw it myself. Water dripping from the rafters, not clean, not clear, thick, white, and when I reached out to touch it, it cut me like tears made of bone. The town said nothing. As always, they swept it up, boarded up the wells, whispered that it was just weather. But in the church ledger, an old book that no one had written in for decades, he found a new entry, scribbled hastily in shaking ink. She weeps still, but now she weeps for us. Her sorrow has turned to bitterness, and bitterness preserves nothing. It only rots slower. I tried to leave Greywick that night, packed my bag, keys in hand, but when I turned onto the main road, there was no road, only water, salt water, rising where the pavement had been, still, reflective, waiting, and in the center of it, bobbing gently like a prayer lost at sea, was a single red shoe, the kind worn by Cora, the girl found eyeless years ago, the one who screamed in silence, the one who was first back at the chapel. The statue had cracked. A new fissure ran from her eye down to her lips, and as I watched, another droplet formed. Not water, not salt, blood. You see, saints are not made of marble. They are made of wounds. And when wounds are sealed in stone, they don't heal, they ferment. And now the town is drinking her pain with every drop from the sky. Episode 5. The night no one could speak her name. It began just after dusk, the hour where Greywick forgets how to breathe. The birds stopped singing, the bells refused to ring, and every candle, even those not yet lit, went out. Something heavy moved through the town, not with footsteps, but with silence. And then the first voice broke. Mrs. Elkins, 92, blind since childhood. She tried to say grace before her soup and collapsed mid-prayer. Doctors said stroke, but I was there. I heard her try again. Blessed be Saint I. Her tongue locked, her jaw clenched, and her eyes filled with blood. By midnight, 12 more had tried to speak her name. Priests, grandmothers, historians. Each one dropped, convulsing, the moment their lips shaped the letter I. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a command, and somewhere beneath the chapel, something was listening. I tested it myself, alone, in that chapel, candle in hand. I whispered, Saint Ilena. Nothing. Then louder, Saint Ilena. Still nothing. And then I tried again, one more time, with meaning, with reverence, with faith. Saint Ilena, if you can hear me. My throat snapped shut. like fingers pressing against the inside of my windpipe. My nose bled, my eyes watered. I fell to my knees, choking on her name, and just before I blacked out, I heard her voice, not angry, not vengeful, heartbroken. "Don't call me saint. I was never crownedly buried." When I awoke, the candle was still burning, but the wax had melted in reverse. The flame hovered above the wick like it was waiting for something. I checked my voice recorder. I had left it running in my coat pocket the entire time. Nothing but static, except for the final second. A single phrase burned into the silence like a brand. "She belongs to the dust, not the altar." That night, the entire town stopped saying her name, not out of fear, out of guilt, because they realized something too late. You can't canonize a woman you buried alive, and you sure as hell can't praise her after you made her a ghost. Episode 6, The Confession Hidden in Her Bones. They buried her beneath the chapel, but they never buried her words. I found the letter behind the altar wall, sealed in wax the color of dry blood. The envelope wasn't addressed. No date, no blessing, just a single phrase etched across its back in trembling script. "Forgive me, even if you won't." I didn't open it immediately. Something about it pulsed like it breathed, like it had been waiting for me, and I couldn't help but ask, what kind of saint needs to confess? I finally opened it at 3:33 a.m. Inside, a note, yellow with age, the ink smeared by what looked like saltwater stains. But it wasn't weeping that ruined the letter. It was fear. The handwriting stuttered, slanted, like the author was running out of time or breath. I was never chosen. I never saw angels. I never heard the voice of God. I only wept when no one else would. They called it divine. They called it a gift. But it was just pain, overflowing. And when the miracles started happening, I thought he had answered. But I never asked for him to take the sick. I only asked that they be seen. And now he takes everything I cry for. I read the last line 3 times. Then I read it out loud. And as I did, I heard scratching beneath the floorboards. Not mice, not pipes. Writing. I peeled back the wooden planks behind the altar. There, carved into the stone beneath with fingernails or boar faith sharpened into madness, were down scenes of sentences, overlapping and wild. Some I couldn't read, but one was clear. I begged him to stop, and he said then stop weeping. She tried to silence herself, to save the town, to protect what little innocence remained. But she couldn't stop, because Ilena wasn't a saint. She was a mirror, and every tear was ours reflected back at us. I closed the letter. When I stood up, the candle beside me had melted into the shape of a hand, fingers pointing to the door. Outside the chapel, the town slept, but in the graveyard behind it, one tombstone had split, and through the crack, faint hand, trembling, I could hear someone whispering my name. Episode 7, The Grave That Breathes When You Pray. Graves aren't supposed to move, but this one did. Subtle, slow, like lungs inhaling dust. I found it just before sunrise. Ilena's tombstone, split down the middle like a wound trying to heal. Moss clung to its edges. The crack pulsed faintly, as if something beneath it wasn't resting, but listening. I knelt, not out of reverence, out of instinct, like some part of me remembered a ritual I never learned. And then I whispered, "I'm not here to judge you." The ground exhaled. It wasn't wind. It wasn't breath. It was a voice, buried deep, twisted by earth and silence. No one prays without wanting something. The soil vibrated under my hands, not violently, rhythmically, like a heart half beating in its tomb. You all came to me, crying, begging, promising your faith in exchange for relief. But no one stayed to carry the weight of answered prayers. Then came the cold, not from weather, from memory. I saw flashes. The chapel, full of sick children. Ilena, kneeling, crying, and every tear that touched the ground. Someone died. Not out of cruelty, but because her pain had become a currency. A curse cloaked in mercy. She asked for healing. He gave her substitution. One life for another. One soul spared, one taken. And the people knew. They kept bringing her the dying, because they believed in balance. Until someone brought their healthy child, just to see if she could do it. And when the child died, they blamed her. The crack in the grave widened. A hand emerged, not skeletal, not rotting, whole, feminine, cold as porcelain. It touched my knee, lightly. I cried for you before you were born. The voice said, now tell me, will you weep for me? I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I was crying, and I didn't know if the tears were mine or hers. By morning, the grave had closed again, but the mark on my knee where her hand touched me had turned into a bruise shaped like a tear, and I swear I heard the dirt whisper, you've been chosen to carry the next sorrow. Episode 8, The Sorrow That Possesses the Living. It started with the bruise, the tear-shaped mark on my knee where she touched me. By morning, it had darkened to a deep violet, pulsing like it had its own heartbeat, and every time it throbbed, I remembered things that never happened to me. A child gasping in a smoke-filled room, a woman giving birth in silence, no midwife but prayer, a man burying his wife in the pouring rain laughing through the grief because crying hurt too much. None of them were me, but I felt all of them, like their sorrow had burrowed into my marrow, like she was inside me now. I tried to fight it, no prayers, no sleep, no mirrors, but Ilena's pain doesn't ask permission, it infects. By nightfall, I could hear their voices, knotting my ears in my bones, weeping, whispering, repeating the same sentence in 100 broken tones. Carry me, carry me, carry me, and then the dreams came. I stood in the chapel again, barefoot. The pews were packed but not with people, with shadows, shapes made of old breath and untold pain. They all faced forward, toward her, Ilena, on the altar, not a statue, a woman, skin gray with loss, eyes empty, but never dry. She looked at me and said, sainted is a wound they worship so they don't have to clean it. Then she pointed to my chest. You open yourself, now you cannot close. I woke up screaming, and the bruise was gone, but in its place, across my ribs, carved like scripture into flesh, a name, not mine, Ilena. I didn't know who she was until I opened my door that morning and found her standing there, 8 years old, pale, shivering, eyes bleeding from the corners, and she said, I've been crying your tears, mister, and they're not mine. The sorrow had moved from Ilena into me, and now into her. This isn't a curse anymore, it's a lineage. Episode 9, The Child Who Bled Prayers. Ilena didn't cry like other children. Her tears came thick, rosy, sticky, and tinged with something that looked like melted wax. She said they started the night she dreamed of a chapel made of skin, where every hymn was a scream, and the altar pulsed like a living heart. I tried to clean her face with holy water. The water boiled, not hot to the touch, had enraged, the kind of heat that comes from something divine, and betrayed. Ilena Saturday on my floor, rocking, humming something low and broken. Her hands were raw from clutching a rosary that wasn't hers. They come when I sleep, she whispered, the ones Ilena couldn't cry for. So now they cry through me. And then she lifted her shirt. Her ribs were covered in words, not ink, not scars, prayers written in blood, but not hers. I recognized one of them. It was the same phrase Father Harrow used the day he died, blessing the statue. Forgive us, for we named her holy only after we buried her. The words pulsed faintly beneath her skin, like they were alive, like they regretted being spoken. And with each breath, more appeared, one down her arm. Take my sin, I'll keep the glory. One near her spine, let her pain buy our peace. These weren't just prayers, they were confessions, stolen, transferred, inflicted, and the worst part, she didn't understand them. She just cried, bled, carried. I called every priest, every healer, every scholar. No one answered. Greywick had learned its lesson. You don't speak the saint's name, and you don't help the ones she chooses. But I couldn't let this child be turned into another relic, another vessel. So I made a choice. I brought her to the chapel, the one they sealed after Father Harrow's death. I carried her past the broken altar, past the statue, straight to the back wall, where her name Ilena had already been carved into the stone, and below it, the vessel must return what the saint cannot carry. Ilena began to scream, not in pain, in Latin, words no child should know, words only saints dare speak, and the walls began to weep. Not water, not salt, ash. The next morning, she was gone. No body, no blood, just the rosary, still warm, still humming, and written on the wall in soft, shaking script. she took them back. For now. Episode 10. The pilgrims who came after. The town was cursed. They came at dawn. Strangers, wrapped in grey cloth, faces hidden, feet bare despite the frost. Pilgrims, but not the kind who came to worship, the kind who came to repent. I counted 7 of them. Each carried a relic and object wrapped in black velvet, cradled like something precious or poisonous. The townsfolk didn't stop them, didn't speak, didn't look them in the eye. They just closed their doors and waited, because they knew, everyone in Greywick knows, once the cursed begin to walk, the town holds its breath. The pilgrim stopped in front of the chapel. One step forward. A woman, lips sewn shut. She reached into her robe and placed something at the statue's feet. When she pulled back the velvet, I saw it, a hard, dried, hollow, carved with scripture too old to read. Then the others followed. One laid down a vial of tears, an other a child's shoe, scorched black, an other a silver chalice filled with blood that hadn't yet clotted. Offerings, tributes, or maybe apologies. They circled the statue, knees to dirt, heads bowed, and then together they began to chant. Not in any language I knew, but the sky reacted, clouds split, light bled through in thin veins, and the statue cracked again, this time from the mouth, as if Ilena had been silent along, as if her sorrow had turned to speech. And in the hush between their final chant and the breaking dawn, I heard her voice everywhere. You prayed for salvation and fed me your guilt. Now you bring me tokens. But where were your hands when they buried me alive? The statue's mouth shattered, and from it, still not stone, but soil, rich, damp, breathing, and inside it, bones, small, curled, cracked, children's bones. The pilgrims wept. One tore off their veil and screamed. I gave for mine to save the town. And just like that, the wind rose, the relics turned to ash, and the heart still beating sank into the soil and disappeared. They left without a word. All 7 vanished before dusk. No footprints, no echoes, only this, carved freshly into the chapel's door. You can't bribe what remembers everything. Ilena was never angry. She was just waiting. Episode 11. The bell that rings for no one. The chapel bell hadn't rung since Father Harrow's death. Not once. Not even when the wind howled or lightning cracked the steeple in two. It was silent, like the town wanted to forget it ever existed. But last night, it rang. Once, at exactly 3:33 a.m. It wasn't loud. It was hollow like bone striking bone, like a warning whispered through an empty tomb. I wasn't the only one who heard it. Windows lit up, curtains twitched, people sat up in bed, clutching their chests like something inside them had been yanked forward. The bell had called, but it hadn't called for anyone living. I returned to the chapel, alone. The doors were already open. The pews were dustier than ever, yet something had moved through them recently. Footprints, but not deep, not full, half-prints, like someone walked without a full weight, or without a full soul. The rope that once controlled the bell had rotted decades ago, zapped, dangling, motionless. But when I climbed the tower, the bell was still swaying, back and forth, not from wind, not from force, from intention. And above the bell, carved into the ceiling beams in jagged, frantic strokes, if she rings it, no one returns. Then I saw it, a handprint, small, slender, pressed into the dust on the bell's rim, burned into the metal. Ilena's. She rang the bell, not to summon, to seal. Suddenly the air grew thick, the silence shifted, and I saw them, faint outlines of people I recognized, but not from life, from dreams, from prayers, from confessions never finished. They stood at the back of the chapel, down scenes of them, mouths stitched, as weeping salt. They weren't ghosts, they were the forgotten, the ones who were never mourned properly, the ones Ilena wept for when no one else did. And now, they had heard the bell. They had come, but not to worship, to reclaim. As I turned to run, the bell rang again, twice, then again, 3 times, and the statue's face in the courtyard was now looking directly at me. Episode 12. The scream beneath the altar. There are sounds you never forget. A child's last breath, a priest begging God to stop listening. The silence after truth is spoken aloud. but nothing sounds like what I heard beneath that altar. The chapel was hollow when I returned, not empty hollow, like something had scooped out the spirit of the place and left only its skin. The pews bled ash. The stained glass no longer held color. The crucifix hung upside down, yet no one had touched it. The bell had rung 3 times. 3 is the number of invitation, and I was the only one foolish enough to accept. I stepped toward the altar. It pulsed with a rhythm that didn't belong to stone or structure. I remembered what Ilena said in the grave. I cried for you before you were born. Now you must cry for me. So I placed my hand on the altar, whispered her name only in thought, and the stone split open, not cracked, split, revealing a staircase that spiraled into black, not just darkness, absence, the kind you feel in your soul's teeth. The air grew cold, not in temperature, in emotion, like grief had carved itself into the wind. And then, from the bottom of the stairwell, came the scream, not human, not beast, something between a prayer and a curse. It didn't enter my ears. It entered my blood, and it said one thing: she is still weeping. I descended, 1 step, then another. The walls bled salt. My breath came in shallow gasps. At the bottom, I found her, not Ilena, but the room where they buried her. The door was still disturbed, as if mourning her absence. In the center, an open space where the ground had collapsed into a pit, and at the edge of it, a single rosary, twisted tight like it had been yanked from a throat. Then the scream returned, but this time, it came from above. I looked up. The chapel was gone, replaced by faces, down scenes, hundreds, looking down, not in judgment, in recognition, and they spoke, together, in Ilena's voice. Now you carry the altar, and the altar carries me. The earth began to shake. The ground was no longer solid, and the scream became mine. Episode 13. The town that tried to forget her. They thought burying her would silence her. They thought carving her in stone would replace what they'd done in dirt. They thought prayers could scrub out guilt like soap on blood-stained hands. But saints don't die. They remember. I don't know how I got out of the altar room. One moment, I was drowning in her scream. The next, I was outside the chapel, lying in the courtyard, covered in ash that wasn't there the night before. The statue was gone. A bell tower had collapsed. The sky above Greywick was silent. But it wasn't peace. It was recoil. The townspeople gathered slowly. They came like mourners who weren't sure if the casket was empty. Faces pale, but not in fear, in recognition, because something had shifted. Not just the chapel, not just me. The curse had changed hands. It started with the oldest families. Their crops turned to ash. Their children spoke Ilena's name in their sleep. Their homes bled salt from the walls. The pilgrims never returned. The priests never stepped foot here again. But the people, they stayed, because Greywick isn't a town anymore. It's a confessional, and every building is a booth. Every raindrop is a tear. Every silence is a scream too holy to voice. As for me, I tried to leave. Truly, I packed, I walked, I drove, but the road always loops. The forest always thickens. The map always crows at her name. I am part of the curse now, not punished, not sainted, just designated, a vessel, a witness, the one who listens when no one else dares. Ilena never wanted vengeance. She wanted grief to matter. She wanted her tears to mean something beyond miracles, beyond statues, beyond stories. Sometimes, at night, I hear her again, not weeping, not screaming, just breathing, like she's resting, finally, because someone, somewhere, still remembers her as a woman, not a myth. The town doesn't speak her name, but the land does. In rain, in roots, in every prayer whispered too late, because Greywick didn't forget Ilena. Ilena forgot how to leave, and now, so have I.